Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for June 17th, 2025. I am Brennan Cassidy. My usual co-host, JD Duran, was too busy having a profound life experience that he wasn't able to see the life of Chuck in time for this review. But I believe I'm being joined by the next best thing. And for a movie like this, I'm glad we have one of the most passionate film voices in all of film criticism right now. Joining us once again is executive editor and podcast host over at AwardsWatch, Ryan McQuade. Ryan, is it safe to say that you are the Charles Krantz of AwardsWatch?
I don't know what that says because then I've only got 6 years to go. But I guess we're going to have to find a new EE over there, man. I mean, I don't like to dance in public, but sure. I'll take
Unless
that.
it has a good drum beat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm a sucker for a good drum beat, as you know.
Oh, same.
But
yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, if you're saying I'm as handsome as Tom Hiddleston, then I'll take that, my friend. I will. I will.
I'm saying you're as profound and life affirming as Charles Krantz.
All right, you get your check of money in the mail today. Good job, Brendan.
Thank you. I was saving up for that one for sure. It's great to have you back, though, man. You know, last time we had you on was for some Oscars-related content earlier this year, episode 621 and 622. We were only supposed to have you on for one episode. And then, of course, the Carlos Sofia Gascon controversy reared its ugly head. And, of course, we had to have an awards expert such as yourself to come back to talk even further about that. We had a great conversation there on both of those shows. But I think the last time it was just the two of us was almost a year ago. We discussed Twisters. Remember that?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes. Who could forget the cinematic masterpiece that was Twisters? They still talk about it. People are outside my house. They're going Twisters. And I'm like, trespassing. You know what I mean? So,
you know, honestly, but between that and the some of the Oscars related talk I just alluded to, now that I think about it, the last few times we've had you on, the discussions haven't been the most positive, which makes me wonder. Well,
well, I don't know what we're doing here today, Brendan, but we'll see. I will say this. Do you mind just me playing a little bit of nostalgia for you right up here at the top?
Please go right ahead.
Since I think that's what Mike Flanagan would want us to do and be nostalgic.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody that's a fan of the old, way we used to do things here at In Session Film, and the first ever appearance I had, it is fitting because the first ever appearance I had on this platform was actually just you and me. It was just you and me, Brendan.
It was, wasn't it?
We did the Glenn Powell film. Speaking of Twisters, we did Glenn Powell and Zoe Deutsch, that Netflix movie that they did.
Set It Off. Was that what it was
called? We did
Set
It Off. I think that was the first film that I ever covered here.
That was a good movie.
Podcast. And we did that, and I think we did some other Netflix coming of age crap that nobody's ever talked about since. Alex Strange Love or
Alex Strange Love. I forgot I even saw that one.
And so it's always like brings me, when I come on and I love JD, don't get me wrong. This is not a shot at JD.
We all love JD.
But there is something weirdly nostalgic about like when I found out today that it was just going to be you and me. I was like, oh, so this is like old school. Like this is throwing back to first time as well. So it was kind of cool that way. It kind of weirdly made me start thinking about that.
That's a great point. I weirdly forget about that sometimes. I often look back.
Well, it wasn't memorable for you. All right.
It wasn't memorable for me. No. Well, because I often think about our review of Mission Impossible Fallout, which I guess was that was the first main show that you were on, which obviously that was really the episode where JD and I thought, okay, now we have to bring this guy on more full time.
Maybe it was Leave No Trace. Or which one came out first? Was it Leave No Trace? Or was it Mission Impossible Fallout? It was one of those two.
It was one of those two.
It was one of those two.
Yeah, but I do remember that one quite fondly, both of those quite fondly. But you're right. I do think the first time you ever made an appearance on In Session Film in some way was just you and I. So given the type of movie that we're talking about, that does very much look back at the past in some way. makes perfect sense for it just to be the two of us. So
I'm just saying, it somehow it just ends up being meant to be.
it's always meant to be. I love you too,
It's
man.
always meant. I love you, buddy.
Let's go ahead and move on to The Life of Chuck. This film was written and directed by Mike Flanagan, based on a short story by Stephen King that was part of a collection of unpublished novellas called If It Bleeds, released in 2020. This is Mike Flanagan's third adaptation of a Stephen King work, if I'm not mistaken. He has a fourth on the way, as he has been tapped to spearhead the upcoming miniseries Carrie, which I'm admittedly not looking forward to. But Life of Chuck, this film had its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival last September, where it made a big splash. It went on to win the People's Choice Award. It garnered very early critical acclaim, many critics hailing it as a potential awards player. So first question, Ryan, Mike Flanagan, yay or nay? And second question, Stephen King, yay or nay?
Well, that's I mean, fundamentally the right questions to ask. So I actually am more of a Flanagan fan than people would think. I think like him and James Wan have sort of cornered the market on making the right kind of, mass populist horror material. And Flanagan has he's really over the last couple of years set up shop at Netflix, and he's had the Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, and I think the greatest thing he's done is the television series Midnight Mass. I don't know
I
if
know
you've ever.
I haven't. I have seen The Haunting of Hill House, and I love that. I think that's my favorite thing of his, but I haven't seen Midnight Mass yet, and I've been hearing many people say it is the best thing that Mike Flanagan has ever made.
Brendan, I know you're not a TV guy.
Yeah,
I'm telling you would love
I'm sure I
that
would.
show.
I'm sure I would.
Very,
especially
very
yeah.
cynical piece of television, but
Okay.
and very creepy and bloody and just a really,
Well,
really good ensemble there.
I like
And
cynical. Sounds like my
yeah,
kind of thing.
and then it's like his film stuff is very interesting. Like I remember seeing Oculus in the theater, and I thought it was fine. And I think Gerald's Game is a pretty good film. And I remember the Ouija sequel, right? It was
Oh, Origin of Evil. Yeah.
Evil, way a step up from the first one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and
Maybe not a
then
great film on its own, but definitely a step up. As far as sequel improvements are concerned, it's definitely one of the best in that kind of category.
and Before I Wake is a movie that took forever and built this sort of
Mhm.
cult status of like it's a really good movie and you should really see it. And I think it kind of got released finally because Jacob Tremblay was in Room,
Yeah.
and they had that traction. And it's a really, it's kind of almost Sixth Sense esque. If
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
it's kind of got that lighter tone of horror still to it. The thing that of his feature films, and I know you and I, in a couple of years ago, we went back and forth on this one. Maybe not on the episode. Maybe we did an episode together on that. But I know in the end of the year, at the end of the year wrap up show, wrap party, we talked about Doctor Sleep, which is a film
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that you're kind of uneven about, and or not. It didn't really like vibe with you. I really liked it for what it
Yeah,
was. You know what
I
I
know
mean?
you
And
really like that one. That's probably the one work of Mike Flanagan's that you and I will severely differ on.
yeah,
It's a
which is
movie I
fine.
didn't care for at the time, and honestly, I think I'm liking less as time goes on. It's like that one
Director's
did
cut
not
really
work.
good too.
I didn't care for it.
You
I
didn't care
couldn't.
for that one either. All
No,
right,
to me, it just felt like it was lengthening the things I didn't like already.
all right,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, so that's the one thing of his I can't really quite go to bat for, but much of his other stuff, as you're talking about, I'm with you. One of his earliest films, Hush, that really small kind of
Yeah,
slasher stalker movie, was really effective. Might be my favorite of his films that I've
yeah.
seen. Although I am kind of a defender of Gerald's Game. I think that's a very interesting one, if not an always successful one, but a very interesting one nonetheless.
Well, I like that film too because of the fact that it you know it's simplistic in the horror.
Yeah.
So the thing about horror movies that are always really great is like, and that kind of scare the pants off of me, is when I think that something like that could happen to myself.
Sure.
Right? When it gets into the supernatural, it's like, okay, none of this is real. Like all this, but when you can level the horror into the relatability, I think that
Mhm.
that's when Flanagan can really do. And I
And when
just
he
think
finds it
that
personal.
yeah, when he finds it personal, I just think he also writes great characters and can still get you even after all these material. And for
Sure.
Stephen King, I mean, Stephen King is Stephen King. Like, who doesn't like Stephen King? Like, I mean, maybe the man doesn't know how to make a ton of endings correctly, or, or some of his stuff isn't better than others, but overall, I think, like, I mean, he's a legend in the field of publishing, and his films for what is it now 30-40 years have endured multiple different
Yeah.
adaptations,
Yeah.
different styles, different characters. I mean, you have a movie like The Monkey come out earlier this year, which is very different than The Life of Chuck, and just kind of shows you, the versatility of stories that you can find, of short stories you can find within Stephen King's work.
Mm-hmm.
Some of his stuff is better, completely better than others, and it also depends on too who's the one at doing the adaptations. I mean, if you're Brendan, this is no secret. If you're an IMDb user, the greatest film of all time is The Shawshank Redemption, and it's based off of his short story. You know what I mean? Like he's part of the American fabric of art as we know it. And
whether he's tied to the art itself, because many of his adaptations, as you say, are spearheaded by other creators, and people associate Stephen King with some of these things that aren't even really tied to Stephen King anymore, such as Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, for instance. Something that Stephen King himself has very actively pushed back against. He's not a big fan of Kubrick's attempt at that. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I definitely prefer Stanley Kubrick's rendition of that story over Stephen King's.
That's not a hot take over in this household. That's
good. That's good.
That's the accurate take.
I don't always love Stephen King as a writer. I haven't read all of his books, obviously. I've only read a handful, but I think I've only liked about half of them. I actually think Stephen King as a writer is at his best when he's writing more contained material. Some of his
short stories.
His short stories are great. Skeleton Crew, that collection is amazing. Different Seasons is probably my favorite thing he has ever written, which includes Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, as well as The Body, which got adapted into Stand By Me. Apt Pupils, part of that as well. I think that and Pet Sematary are probably my two favorite works that he has ever written. But I did get through maybe a quarter of it, and I just had to put it down. I think I felt like I read through 5 pages and I was like, all he's doing is describing a chair. and I that's all I couldn't get past it.
Have you ever seen that? Not that I'm like a big fan of Family Guy or anything, but there's a bit that Family Guy did years ago where it was like he was at a publisher's, like they were mimicking Stephen King or making fun of him, and he was like, Stephen, you kind of running out of ideas. This latest book wasn't that good. And he's like, I got a new idea for a book. It's about, and he grabs a lamp and he goes, this lamp. Ooh. And you're like, and the publisher just looks at him like this and he goes, when can you have the first 100 pages? You know what I mean? And that's kind of where the last like couple of years, last decade or so of work for Stephen King has been. It's like publishers are just saying yes because this will make a ton of money. I mean, he's a cottage industry.
His name
he's
recognition
like James
alone.
Patterson. He's he's like these guys that you can put his name on anything and it's going to sell millions and millions of copies. The closest thing about Stephen King to me is my wife loves reading his books, and especially his older books. And
The Dark Tower, that's his best era. His older stuff, like Misery, I think is one of his better books as well.
She's really big also into the Dark Tower series. And I think that's the other thing too, is nobody's been able to really adapt that or try to bring that. I think Flanagan's talked about it as well. I mean, like he's basically got like life, like life rights to these things, because Stephen King and him, it is really interesting. You just see the relationship that they have built over these, because King's very precious of, about the certain people that have come across and wanted to do these things. And now later in his life, I think he sees that Flanagan understands the genre the best and really kind of understands what he's going for in his writing. So I do think that it's mostly a pretty good marriage between two people, because I think Flanagan's able to take the sort of stupid, ridiculous crap that you can find inside a Stephen King novel and then and then turn it and ground it into the right kind of entertainment that I think people want to see today, and also provide his own take and feel to it. So
I think that's a good point.
Interesting,
I think that is a good point, because something that Mike Flanagan is rather good at, and I don't love everything Mike Flanagan has done, But as far as how he understands Stephen King, he is somehow able to successfully tap into both the sweetness and the stupidity of Stephen King, if for lack of a better term. Because some of Stephen King's later material got rather goofy, and sometimes
Yeah.
Mike Flanagan seems to understand that portion just as much as the tender side of
Yeah.
Stephen King. And while that marriage doesn't always work, I don't think there's another filmmaker or even television maker out there today that maybe understands both sides of Stephen King equally.
Yeah.
He seems to get that. We'll talk about whether the life of Chuck is successful at that marriage, and I think that might be a solid transition to get back into the life of Chuck. As I mentioned, written and directed by Mike Flanagan. The film stars Tom Hiddleston, kind of. Um, three
Kind of.
actors act. Three actors actually play the role of Charles Krantz here at different ages.
Well, technically 4 do.
Well, it's four. Yeah, you're right. Cody Flanagan also plays a small part here as well.
Mhm.
That also includes Jacob Tremblay in a small role. Benjamin Pajic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's
Yeah.
probably the most crucial of all of them. He probably
He's
gets
the most Chuck you get.
He's the most Chuck. He's the chuckiest of them all.
Yeah. He's
But
the
yeah,
big
obviously,
chunk of Chuck you
big
get.
chunk of
Yeah.
Chuck. He's the chunk
Yeah.
of Chuck here. But yeah, it's interesting with Tom Hiddleston getting top billing here. He's actually one of the lesser consequential versions of Chuck that we get in this
Well, that's
movie.
what happens when you're low key.
That's what you're
Brendan.
low key.
Exactly. There you go. See, now I'm back. See, now
You're back. The
everybody-
puns are back.
the
and Session
puns are
Film is
back, and
back,
the
my
annoying
friend.
stuff that comes out of my mouth,
Yeah.
is back on the show. There you go.
Can't wait to get into our thoughts on this movie. The film also includes the likes of Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, Carl Lumbly, Mark Hamill, Mia Sara, Matthew Lillard, Koryanka Kilcher, among many others in small roles. The film, according to IMDb anyway, is a life-affirming, genre-bending story about 3 chapters in the life of an ordinary man named Charles Krantz. We may have something to say about that whole life-affirming thing. We'll save that for later. We should also note that this movie is told reverse chronologically. I know a lot of people have noted that already, but that is sort of the central gimmick of this thing. There's very much a reason for that, as I'm sure we'll talk about. But let's get right into it. Ryan, lay it on me. Did you find Chuck's life to be a life-affirming experience?
Brendan, you don't know if my thoughts on this film, do you?
I do.
Already?
I do.
Okay.
I know our listeners don't. I'm setting them up for surprise.
All right. That's fair. Okay. Short answer is no. And the long answer is I think this is one of the worst movies of the year.
Wow, there it is. Okay. That's what I was hoping to hear.
And I think this is, if we're doing lists, because I know you guys have been doing like best of the decade so far, this might be one of the most annoying, just completely dysfunctionally flawed films I've seen of the decade so far. And the reason why is I think that it is, you mentioned its structure. I think its structure is just cataclysmic to the momentum of this film, the purpose of this film. Each act plays differently and honestly doesn't make any real connection or sense to one another, outside of just this conceit of this main character, Chuck Krantz. And I was so I was, Stephen King and a lot of his adaptations that I really do like aren't actually the horror films. They are the films that you mentioned, like The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me, and these films that are ripped from the short stories and are really great sort of slice of life, life lessons and the word life affirming and everything, these journeys, these epics you sort of go on.
Yeah.
I find them much more compelling at times because I think, like Frank Darabont and Rob Reiner were able to add their touches to that to make that story more expansive for the theatrical experience.
Sure.
And I felt that because, watching Flanagan, who, I mean, we should note this movie won the Audience Award at the Toronto International Film Festival last year, which is a very big deal. Like, we're talking about like movies that go on to get nominated and win Oscars, win that award every single year. So it is a very big deal that it won. I think it won off the back of many people being super, super fans of Mike Flanagan, having a cult following, and also Stephen King. And also because this schmaltzy little film can get you under your, manipulate your heartstrings a bit.
More for maybe more them latching onto the idea that, oh, Mike Flanagan and Stephen King can finally be in this kind of conversation.
Exactly. And I think that this is their sort of first time ever taking that sort of more sensitive King material and trying to look into that and find the beauty within the world of of King's writing. And I think that it's a cataclysmic mistake and a terrible use of their collaboration because listening to Mike Flanagan talk about this movie, I don't think he understands anything of what this is supposed to be. He's talked about like this is supposed to be like a love letter for my kids. If I showed this to my kids, I would be it would be within the state's rights to take them away from me. It would be. And I would understand. I mean, because like I don't think you should show this movie to kids because the first third of this movie is an apocalyptic nightmare. It's the most cynical thing that you can show, but then the rug is completely pulled out from you because you find out within like the first 10 minutes, it's so hinted at about what this thing is. So that renders that third pretty hollow. Then the most Hiddleston you get is just a scene. Like it's one sequence.
The dance sequence, yeah.
And it doesn't really add up to anything until you get to the third. So that one's kind of a wash too. By that third is when you're supposed to be on board with this thing. You're supposed to be riding with it. And there are moments in it that are pretty good. But then I was just kind of watching it going like, man, a movie like The Fabelmans already kind of touched on this. Back to the Future kind of touched on this. There's about half a dozen movies that have touched on this subject, and they're all a hell of a lot better than this thing. And so I was just left there being like, what was the point of this exercise? I thought a lot about Interstellar for the first part. I thought about a movie that I really like. I don't know if you like it. Big Fish from Tim Burton.
I love Big Fish. I think that was my favorite film of that year that it came out.
I think so, yeah. And I was thinking a lot about how like that's a movie like this where it's blending the reality in with the supernatural with your reality and how we tell stories and our story and how it connects to the universe and how it connects to the people we love and all these different things. But then, Brendan, I really thought about one particular scene in film. It's from the comedy Animal House. Have you seen Animal House? Yes.
Of course I've seen Animal House. I know where you're going with this.
Let me paint the picture for everyone. So there's a moment in that movie where the characters smoke weed with their professor played by Donald Sutherland. And as two of the characters are kind of sitting there high off their ass, smoking weed the entire time, the one student is looking at his professor, Donald Sutherland, and literally asking him about like, so if this little thing on my finger, if you really expand it out, it's kind of like one tiny infinite universe. And when I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh, okay. So Mike Flanagan thinks none of us have seen that and thinks we're all dumb. Like that's really what I thought watching
that
this.
Should be the poster review of this. Animal House is more enlightening than The Life of Chuck.
It really is. I mean, college, the best 7 years of your life. But
I love that movie.
The last thing I'll say, and then I'll kick it over to you, is for a movie that kept quoting Walt Whitman's "I contain multitudes" and telling you and telling you and telling you it contains multitudes. The movie goes out of its way fundamentally to stay one note the entire time and not contain multitudes. I think for me emotionally, I thought it was a pretty tedious exercise. There have been some films I've seen already because I was lucky enough to go to some film festivals already that are some of the worst films of the year. They are produced by the same company here. Shout out to Neon. And this just adds to what I'm going to say is one of the most uneven box sets we're going to get at the end of the year from Neon, leading to one of the worst films of the year so far.
Well,
in the life of Chuck.
Well, no one's perfect. And I think Neon's maybe learning that lesson right
I
now.
think so. I think you had your mountaintop with Honora, and now it's all the way down. But they're
Yeah.
actually they got some good movies.
They got some good stuff. There'll always be some good stuff, I'm sure.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if you know my thoughts on this movie. I knew yours
I
going
think
into
I
this.
kind of do, but
I feel like I haven't been very.
I think you've been a little
cryptic.
coy on it.
Well,
Like,
I mean, I am a little coy. I'm always a little
Yeah.
coy leading up
I
to
know
my
you
thoughts,
are.
but which
You're a
is
coy boy.
weird for a movie like this because I don't share your hatred of this movie,
Yeah.
but I didn't particularly care for it either.
Yeah, I know you. Yeah.
I'm
There's
kind
no
of like
way you can sit up here and be like,
I think the reason why I'm being coy is because I'm just kind of neutral on this thing, and I don't really have much passion for it, which is not really the intent that the film wants. I feel like,
yeah.
yeah, coming out of the theater having seen it, my first thought was that this would have worked better as a 3-episode miniseries, which is a medium that Mike Flanagan normally excels at, as we've talked about.
It's his best medium
I think so. I think so. Upon reflection, though, given the nature of this story, I don't think a visual medium works for this material at all.
That's a fair point.
Because the whole thematic conceit is dependent on its lack of uniqueness. The whole notion is that we are the stars of our own stories, how our minds and experiences, as simple as they might be, they feel like our entire world. So I have not read Stephen King's short story, but I feel like this is a story that only works in written form, where I'm allowed to project myself into it rather than have a movie do the work visualizing and personifying it for me. Just the fact that this movie casts actors that we know kind of gives it too much specificity when I think it needed more opacity. On top of that, you also have this god-awful voiceover narration from Nick Offerman. And he's someone I love. I like
love
Nick
Nick
Offerman quite a
Offerman.
bit. And I can't help but wonder, I can't help but assume, rather, that his voiceover is ripped directly from the short
text.
story because it does feel very Stephen King-like. It's very pompous in that way, which I think could work in purely written form because it's meant to invite you into something that's not meant to have those specifics. But I think it completely collapses on itself when it just does nothing but pompously hold your hand along the way. And by the end, it really just turns this movie into a very basic live life to the fullest message. It's a Hallmark movie. It's very much a Hallmark movie. It's delivered with the self-importance that you could imagine it being written by Alan Loeb, the guy who did like Collateral Beauty and that stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Kinda has
It's totally a movie you think about when you're watching this thing.
You know, funny enough, you know what movie I was thinking of while watching this? And this is a weird comparison because this is the movie that came out maybe about 10 years ago. It was universally panned by pretty much every critic except for myself and JD. We actually defended it a little bit. Remember The Book of Henry, the Colin Trevorrow film?
How could you forget the movie that literally destroyed the Star Wars universe?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it really did. Like that was that was the whole thing. Like they
kind of did. That's
saw
what
Book of Henry, and it was headlined the worst movie of all time. And then they took that from him, and then we got Rise of Skywalker after that. So, like, I mean,
and
Colin Trevorrow then went back to Dino World.
I kind of defend the Book of Henry because I think the first half is kind of good. It's really just where it goes in the third act that just means absolute bullshit. But the way people reacted so negatively to that movie and the criticisms they had of it are some of the criticisms I have of this movie. I don't actively hate The Life of Chuck, so it's maybe a weird comparison, but I was kind of thinking of the kind of the cloying nature of how it's really trying to claw at your emotions. I felt some similar attempts at that in a way that felt kind of fake, honestly. But like I said, I can't outright dismiss The Life of Chuck because I do think there are individual moments here that are very good in vacuums. And we could talk about some of those as this conversation goes. I just don't know if they work in conjunction with one another and making a full movie out of it. So I'm very much split on this one. Mixed to negative is the best way I can describe it.
Well, Book of Henry also stars Jacob Tremblay.
That's
so
true.
That's probably
There's a nice little connection.
Where you were also there in your head. I think Flanagan was tying the connection there for you, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just hate it. I'm just trying to call it out what I see. Like it's not like I'm not gonna, when we see as many movies every year as we can, and I'm not like there's gonna be if you would love to have me on later in the year for some other films, I'm much more venomous about those than I would be something like this. I think the problem is that this is one of the worst films of the year because it's also extremely disappointing. It's extremely disappointing because of the hype that it was built
It does not
upon.
live up to the hype. It
It
really
doesn't live up to
doesn't.
the hype. It doesn't live up to being a prize winner of any kind. I mean, think about this.
Mhm.
This prize was one that, like, you know, that I think it beat out Nora, and I think the other film was A Million Prayers. That's not saying much. But then, like, you know, American Fiction, The Boy and the Heron, and stuff like those are films that were in the running the year before.
Yeah.
And so with that comes, you know, as Spider-Man 2 would say, with great power comes great responsibility. And
Mhm.
with great enthusiasm and also being like touted as this masterpiece, you kind of go into it and you're like, okay, what do you got? But then you're also like, I like this pair. This
Yeah.
pair has delivered before. So why doesn't it work? And Brendan, I think you're absolutely right. Like, on a fundamental level, as an adaptation, like, it doesn't, I think the idea of having this backwards, I think the idea of this of the film's plot being laid out like this, and
Mhm.
that this is supposed to be the important moments that lead up of Kranz's life. And like, this is where in the middle bit when he's dancing here, that this is supposed to be like this giant epiphany, ties into his childhood, all this different stuff. Like, it should maybe be more normalized in terms of storytelling, back and forth, going from section to section. The mystery maybe is of the first act, which is essentially the third act, being kind of kept from you to understand what this all is, how these all connect to one another. But then again, maybe it pulls off a Collateral Beauty at that point, and you're like, oh, what a stupid ending that would be. You know what I mean? Almost feeling like
Among
a
many
little bit
things.
like that movie Serenity with Matthew McConaughey a couple of years ago, where you're like, wait a minute, that's what this is? Like, this is a
No,
thing
yeah.
about a video game inside a kid's
That was
head?
an interesting movie, though.
It was like that, for an idea like that's kind of where this movie is going with that first act, where it is literally threading the needle of like, your whole world would not exist if it's connected to one person's life source, which is a very like dark thing. But also Flanagan's humor in those moments it's very odd. There's
It's
a porn
awkward. Yeah.
there's a Pornhub joke in there that just doesn't land right. There's stuff with Matthew Lillard, who, like, I gotta say something really quick. This is a side tangent, but like, Matthew Lillard's done a lot of press for this movie. He's in
Yeah.
like one scene, and then like people are like, "Oh my god, he's transcending the movie." Like, he's in there for like
He
two
has a
minutes. Like, what are we
monologue.
talking?
He's good in
Yeah,
the monologue.
I mean,
It's not a bad performance, but it's not transcendent. It's not
it means
revelatory.
nothing to this movie.
Well,
And
especially
that's
given how that first act, or Act 3, as the
Act
first act
Three.
is called,
Yeah,
I mean, like, the thematic summation of that is that it's technically not real. I mean,
yeah,
it's basically it's the mind of a man who is deteriorating, and his world is the thing that's crumbling. The people that he met along the way, big and small. So I like that idea, but I do wonder, and I was thinking about this as I was driving home from the theater. Would this have worked better if it was actually told chronologically?
that's what I'm trying to say. Is
Yeah,
chronologically a little bit. Yeah,
I don't know if it would have.
I don't think so either.
I think what may have helped is if it were just simply told non-linearly and didn't have the 3-act structure
Yeah,
regardless.
I think if it's just sold maybe in a different package, but I also think too, it makes there is no really form of connection as to why this person on their last day would be, of essentially life, would be wanting
Well
to, potentially, think about these people that are really honestly non-sequential to
well,
major decisions of their life. Like,
yeah,
it,
and that's exactly why I don't think this material translates to the screen,
yeah,
whether it be in television or film, because by making it in this way, the movie is asking us to identify with this character. But
yeah,
when it's on the page, it doesn't ask you to do that. It
no,
allows you to project your life into Chuck as if he's like a cipher. On the page, I can only imagine that he would be something like the hero Link from The Legend of Zelda. He's meant to be a blank
mhm,
slate because you project yourself into that hero as if a way of learning what heroism is all about. And I feel like Chuck is kind of a similar cipher for this particular story, but the way they do it here by getting so specific with it, it kind of collapses on itself. And that's what doesn't work about it. Even though I do like individual pockets of this movie, but I like them in vacuums. I don't necessarily like them
They're not good
in
together.
I don't think they
Yeah,
really work together.
they don't fit.
No,
Yeah.
I really did enjoy that second act, primarily because I just wanted to see a movie of these
Life
buskers.
with,
I
like,
just wanted to see I just wanted to see these buskers go on an adventure, making money and
yeah,
starting a makeshift family. But I like it because of what it's just simply doing on its own terms and not what it means for the life of Chuck. That's the
yeah.
big difference.
Well, I think also too, like, the ideas that the first, I'm just going to call it the first act because that's what it is.
Yeah, act 3 is
Whatever.
act 1.
Well, yeah, whatever. It's so that's the other thing. It's stupid. It is a stupid thing. Let's just say it. It's stupid. We're like dancing around trying to explain it. Everyone out there's listening.
I
And they're
don't think
like,
it
wait,
works. I'm with
act
you.
1 is act 3, but 2 is 2, and 1 is 3. Like, what kind of Terrence Howard math are we doing right now? Like let's like just actually talk about the film. And the first act, where it's talking about some really great big issues. It's talking about our planet, politically speaking, how isolated we are, all these things.
Yeah.
Okay, but those are for these characters that we're not going to have any attachment to throughout the other 2 acts of this film. And we also don't know if any of that is actually Krantz himself having those internal things about the world he's about to leave and the
Yeah.
legacy he's about to leave. Because when the other 2 acts, Brendan, we don't get any idea as to what the ideas of this guy. I mean, like, for God's sakes, this guy's just like, I just want to dance. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's great. Like, good for you. You just want to like dance or be an accountant. Like, that's your only options, which is that's a real bad hand to be dealt. But like, but
It's
still, like,
I don't
the
mind the
movie,
oversimplification of it, but there's
tie it
nothing
together.
beyond that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right, and I don't think the movie structure does it any favors.
Because then the doom by the end of it, it's just kind of misery for no reason other than to just pontificate the author and the adapter's own personal thoughts of what's really going on. But then again, their version of that shouldn't be about them. It should be in service of their main character. And they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And I bring up Big Fish again, because I think
So good. So
I think
good.
that is like truly, as I start to think about it, like it is top tier Burton. It might be his best film.
That's my favorite
It's
at the very least.
yeah,
It's
I
hard to
mean,
say best because, movies like Edward Scissorhands are
yeah.
so Tim
So
Burton. And I
yeah.
mean, that movie's basically about Tim Burton himself. So you kind of
Yeah.
have to cite that as one of his best, if not his best. But Big Fish has always been a favorite of mine.
It's been a favorite of mine. But like, the great thing about that movie is, as we hear Finney tell these stories, and it's up to the audience and also his family to believe what is real and what is not. And then by the
Mhm.
time we get to that funeral, we understand the facts that are real and the facts and the fiction that he told to entertain,
Yeah.
to keep you to have memories. And I think that what that movie does beautifully in tying everything together by the end is not done here. It's done poorly here.
Yeah.
There's no tying of anything together, because then these characters reappear in the real world, but they don't leave an impression. They're not like, they're just a guy that served him punch, or the lady that's across the way in the room. And having these big actors play those people, it is a distraction.
I think
It's a
that's my big
distraction.
problem. I think that's my big problem because often I think about in my own life, there have been some people that made impressions on me for reasons I don't even know. Like I might
Yeah.
remember the person that I bought coffee off of the other day for quite a while for some reason. I don't know why. Similar to what Chuck is going through, but the fact that these people are played by such recognizable actors, it's inadvertently asking us to start identifying with them a bit more. And I do think that's where it starts to collapse on itself. And it's unfortunate because the cast is quite stacked. And I don't think anyone here is giving a bad performance.
No,
I think
I
everyone
don't
here
think
is
so
technically
either.
doing good work. Maybe I'll save it later, but there is one performance in here that I might keep in the back of my mind when we get to best performances of the year. I think there's one performance here that is quite stellar.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll go ahead and say it. It's Mia Sara, who plays his
Yes.
grandmother in the third
Yeah.
act. I think, and she came out of retirement for this role. She was retired for I think 14 years, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. She is so good here. I was blown away by this performance. Mark Hamill's also very good, but she was the standout for me more than
I
anyone
think
else.
Hamill's sort of the bigger performance people are are attaching themselves to, because he has
Mhm.
two kind of monologue sequences.
Yeah.
One in particular about Chuck having to essentially grow up and get rid of the idea of being a dancer, or
Choose
that
between
dance.
art
And
and math and how they're actually the same
exactly.
thing.
But then I just think, oh, okay, so Judd Hirsch did this extremely way better in the Fablemans,
It's a good
and
comp. That's a good
it
comp.
in a movie that ties everything perfectly together from the beginning to the end, and makes you feel the struggle of art and family from the get-go to all the
Yeah.
way to the end of that movie. That movie is fundamentally better than this in every single fashion, but that's also
Mhm.
just because that's one of the best films of the decade, period, end of story. This movie takes that character, and like, I think Hamill's good, but it's like, I think you're right, Brendan. Mia Sara's performance is something where, like, that's where you find Chuck's sensitivity. That's where I think you learn the most about him, and also that's the
Mhm.
most influential person throughout this entire film on
She
him.
becomes the through line in many
She
ways.
is the through line. The problem is that, you know, she's not in the rest of the film. There's
Yeah,
no
the
callback for
narrative
that.
has to dispose of her because apparently that's what Stephen King originally wrote.
Exactly, and I think also too, like, if this movie was like the first act, or in this case the third act, the
Y
final act.
yeah.
God, it's stupid. Anyway, um, if it was just when it's with Benjamin Patrick, right, and
Yeah.
who I think is pretty good in the film too.
I think
Obviously,
he's the best Chuck.
yeah, I
I mean,
I
he's also
don't
the most
disagree.
Chuck.
He's the most Chuck, but I think he's the best Chuck. I do agree with you.
Yeah.
I think if it was just centered on that, and then maybe a small flash forward to what he would become, and I think if it's done that way, rather than this feels like an episode, like you're saying, it
Mhm.
feels episodic, and
Yeah,
it
in the
feels
wrong
and it
ways.
in the wrong ways, because you're traveling back, but you're not. But honestly, the movie should have had a moment as we travel back, and an epilogue to travel forward, to see what is about legacy. What did he leave behind?
Mhm.
Something with his family. His all the stuff with his family, wasted. Don't even know anything about those people. Don't care. They don't mean anything, even though we're supposed to. Even though, like, that's what the director of this movie is making the movie about. He's making it for his family. He doesn't really, like, give a crap about them, at all. And it's like, I kind of want to go read the story to understand, is this entirely what Stephen King wrote, like, page for page? Because if that is the case, and Flanagan didn't make any changes, and he sort of did like a copy paste over into
Mhm.
this, then they didn't elevate any of this material, like you're saying, for the medium of film.
Yeah.
And
It's
also,
yeah.
as an adaptation, it's quite lazy, because you got to add more, and
Yeah. Well,
you got to be able to mold this thing out, and
s
and,
yeah.
and it just is completely wasted. And yeah, I think
Sad
Hiddleston and
yeah.
others are fine, but Brendan, they're kind of wasted by this material.
I think so, and sadly, Stephen King has been pretty vocal about which adaptations of his work he likes versus those that he doesn't, and coincidentally, the ones that are the most faithful, that really do a great job translating his work as opposed to adapting his work, they tend to be the ones he likes most because he's
Yeah,
just so he loves his own material so much. He has a right to be
beholden
up
to it.
yeah, he
Yeah,
has a right to feel upset if he doesn't like an adaptation, but certain words on a page and the way stories unfold on a page don't always translate well to the screen. And that's why I said in my opening thoughts, I think this is a story, if to your point, if that's true and the way it unfolds in the story is exactly how it plays out here, I'm willing to bet it's one of those stories that purely works in written form. And I
yeah,
just don't think this is the type of story, especially from Stephen King, that was ever meant to see the cinematic light of day. I
yeah.
just I just don't think it was.
Do you think, like, how much money did they actually make dancing? Like, I was sitting there, I was like, they made so much money dancing. She gave
Given how many people were standing around there, I would have to assume that each person at that promenade probably gave, I don't know, couple bucks maybe on average.
But it
Maybe
looked like,
I mean,
by the
give
stack
I
of
mean
cash that she was given, like, it looked like they all made, like, $1,000 a
I
piece
mean,
for
if
this
every
dance.
person in that crowd gave a 20, which I doubt that they
I
did,
doubt that they
then
did,
I'd
but
say, yeah, you're probably right. I think each person made, like, probably 4 figures or something like that.
this movie, the more I think about it, this movie is, like, perfect for the TikTok generation. because in segments of this thing, you can like probably put it online on TikTok, like a
Mhm.
10-minute TikTok, and like kind of space it out in scenes and sections. And it could probably work. Like you could put up, Chiwetel Ejiofor with the guy walking to his ex-wife's house. And there's a probably inspirational quote, or a poster you can put all that on.
This
And then like,
this movie is a collection of like 5 or 10 really great short films.
yeah. And then you could put like the dance sequence, and then you could put like him learning how to dance and the stuff with his grandmother and the Blockbuster video rentals. And then you could put like the how like on TikTok, Brendan, they have like the piano music, right? Like because it's very serious.
Sure.
And then that's where Mark Hamill's monologue goes, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end, you can have like Jacob Tremblay, who looks like a completely AI generated person. You could have like his like final moment there as well at the morgue. And that's what this whole thing is. It feels like clipped together things for another medium that isn't film. And at
Yeah.
times I don't, I think you're right. I just don't know if this is a movie. Like, I don't even I get mad at it because like this is very interesting ideas.
Mhm.
This type of material from King is rich
Yeah.
with humanity and lessons. And, again, I think like you kind of, everyone's been saying you need a movie like this. I'm in agreement with that. I think we need
Yeah,
more
we just need a good one.
sincere, heartfelt, tender filmmaking that isn't so serious and cynical all the time. Like, I like cynical
Mhm.
movies. You love cynical
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
We love those stuff, but also like something that like, yeah, emotionally is just like manipulative and going to get to us. Sometimes those movies are great because then they can really just, when you really pull them apart, you can start thinking about stuff. This movie, I think, wants to be that, but for so many reasons, it can't allow itself to be that. And I think it just fundamentally comes down to, like you're saying, from the adaptation.
Mhm.
And then you can put as much lipstick on this pig as you want. You can put all this cast together. You can have it look as fine as it does. Like it's not an offensively looking film,
It's
aesthetically
fine. It's
speaking.
fine.
It's pretty low key for them and everything. And yet it just feels like a wasted exercise. And again, Mike Flanagan, you're making this for your children. I'd like to talk to your children because like I would
I'd
literally
love
like
to
to,
see what they get out of this,
yeah,
honestly.
like I would love to be like, I 100% think they went, cool, dad, and then walked out of the theater and then just like literally got out of there. And he's like, I made it for you. And they were like, nah, we're gonna
Or
go
they're probably
see.
like, "That was cool," and then they forget
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. And then they go, but then they're like, but Minecraft's a real movie,
I
Like,
although, like, there are tonal choices here that I think I'd like to see Mike Flanagan explore more. I would love to see him do a family film,
no, I
like a
think like,
movie for kids. I think he would actually be very good at that if it's a tightly constructed product,
yeah, I think that
which the
third act, like if they made like if he made like what is that? What's the Danny Boyle?
Oh, Millions?
Yeah, if he made something like that, or no, it's not Danny Boyle. It's somebody else. Okay, it starts with a Z. Do you know what I'm talking about here? It's like a kids film. I'm gonna remember here in a minute. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
But like Zathura. So
Oh,
no,
Zathura or Zathura.
Zathura.
Zathura, the
Yeah,
John Favreau film, which was
yeah, the
basically
John
like
Favreau
it was
film. Yeah,
basically Space Jumanji.
yeah. If he made something like that, I think he would totally. No, I'm being dead serious. I think
Yeah.
that would be a great concept for him. Like
No, I think that's
something
actually a
like
pretty good
that.
movie.
You know what I mean? I mean, I just think something along those lines where it's something small that it expands, because
Mhm.
I think he has great world building in his storytelling, and he's very detailed. Like when you watch his television stuff, that is so, all the supernatural, all the horror, all the world building is based around character. So
Mhm.
that's what kind of dumbfounds me about this movie is like it's so limited on character,
Yeah.
Brendan.
Yeah.
It's limited on who we know here and who we
Mhm.
actually like buy into. And we should actually only be really buying into one character. We should buy into Chuck. It's the titular character. And even still at certain points for literally two out of these three sections, I could care less. I'm more like interested in just Tom Hiddleston doing
You
something different than Chuck
you
doing something.
you know what movie actually succeeded at pulling this very thing off, but still cast really well-known actors in their roles.
Mm.
The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Well, I mean, now you're just talking about David Fincher in a movie that makes me cry. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But that movie also understood too, like something about like this and like aging a story backward. Like that's a love story.
It's a love story, but it's also one where Benjamin himself in that movie isn't the most identifiable of characters, and yet somehow, like, given his unique condition, we still find ourselves latching onto his very ordinary life and thinking about our own lives. It kind of allows us to project ourselves into this odd situation. And that's a movie that's even more fantastical than The Life of Chuck is. And weirdly, this movie feels way too specific by comparison.
This is, I think you're right. I think it's trying to have like that Forrest Gump, Benjamin Button-esque sort of epicness through the life of some titular human being. And it doesn't have the technical ability to expand it, nor does it have it on the page enough to do it. It's so beholden to its source material, I believe, that it doesn't allow itself to expand, and that's probably why King loves it, to your point, so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like that's the thing about Benjamin Button that works so well, is like you can go on Benjamin's journey, but it's really this is Daisy's journey as much as it is his.
It's true.
And that's the other thing, is the secondary characters in here, like, you know, his grandmother, played by Mia Sarah, she's wonderful in this film, but she is not even a secondary character. She is like a third character in this, you know.
They're
like,
all
really
kind of ciphers in a way.
Yeah, they're all just, you know, passing ships in the night, really, on this. And that's what's so devastating, is I don't know anything about him other than he's an accountant that likes to dance. That's not enough to know about a life. You know what I mean? That's not enough to have a body of work. Like, you know, when you think, you know, I don't normally do this, but when I think about movies after the story we've got us told, right? And like, what's the next scene? What's the next moment? Like, it's an exercise you can do if you're a writer, but like, it's really kind of pointless because the movie ends when it ends.
Yeah.
If this movie is trying to be earnest about these people, I think about the fact that, like, what would his wife and his son say about him at the eulogy? And what I would assume is they're going to tell me a bunch of stuff that would be a surprise to me based off of the events that I see here. If this is a summation of life, it's a pretty boring, basic life.
Which, again, I'm okay with that notion.
I'm okay with it, but live in that misery, live in that regret.
Or don't make a movie about it and cast specific people in it. I think
give me something with Hiddleston where he's talking about, I mean, I know a monologue is terrible, but shoot, everybody's getting one in these things. And I would have loved to seen something of like just a moment between him and his wife, a moment of regret, a moment of sadness, a moment of reflection, a moment of
either
epiphany,
make him a blank slate or fully personify him. You can't live in the middle.
They're dancing literally in the middle of all this.
Yes.
So
anyway, I feel like we said our piece. Do you have any final thoughts on The Life of Chuck as we wrap this up?
You mentioned it. Nick Offerman's
oh my gosh,
his narration. I love Nick Offerman. I can listen to that man. You know, one of my favorite, Brendan knows this, my favorite band is Wilco, and they release various sets of their live shows. And one year, to introduce their live show, Nick Offerman came out there and announced that they were playing their whole album all in a row of being there. And it's one of my favorite live recordings because you know which one I'm listening to, because you hear Nick Offerman, and it's just a very soothing voice, and that laugh is undeniable. And I love Nick Offerman, and I love his books and everything. And every time I heard him in this, I wanted to punch the fucking sky. Like I was so angry with him. I was like, this is the thing. It's like, it's the screenwriting 101 thing. It's the thing in adaptation. It's the thing that we all know, where it's like,
the voiceover is so unnecessary.
It's so unnecessary. Like, I think it would have been better without it completely, but also would have made the character more interesting. The things around us, it's all
it focuses on the look. It forces us rather to look at those nuances.
Yeah.
And maybe it would have allowed that blank slate kind of mentality to really work. It's why there's no voiceover narration in something like Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. If there
Yeah.
was,
Oh
it would
man.
not work. But that's a movie where these characters aren't
Who would
really
have done the
characters.
narration in Dunkirk?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. But
Yeah.
that would have been really good.
That would have been interesting.
They go on the bloody ships and they save everybody in the water. Yeah, that would have been really good. Yeah. You know what? Somebody do that. Somebody make that movie now.
I want, yeah, but let's not have AI do that.
Come on, Batman, get out of the water. Bane's right up there in the cockpit. You know,
Yeah.
like that would have been really good. No, but it's bad here. I will say this. I love that Chuck kind of invented the moonwalk and nobody talks about it. Like it's kind of like that's where the Back to the Future thing comes, where it's like, hey.
It's like, yeah, this one has the moonwalk. Back to the Future had Johnny Be Good.
Exactly. And it's like, all right, everybody in this small town learned, and then I guess somehow Michael Jackson figured it out. You know, he called Chuck up.
How
Mike
ironic.
Flanagan,
How ironic, because this movie's called The Life of Chuck, and in Back to the Future, Johnny Be Good is a song by Chuck Berry.
Berry. See, it's all there, Brendan. And the movie's also edited by Mike Flanagan, and I think that also explains a lot here as well.
Perhaps.
And I think I do think though the sequence at the end of the first act, what we see with Kieran Gillen and Chiwetel Ejiofor completely wasted. Need new agents like Chiwetel Ejiofor. Like, he's got to stop picking like these really random. Like, he's such a great actor. I don't understand why he's not like in prestige dramas, getting Oscar nominations and like dominating the world. Because like, I feel like he picks a lot of really like crap to do, and like people don't know how to utilize him because he's such I think he's such a great actor. But that I will say the one horrific thing that you see in this film, which I think the rest of the movie, like the whole conceit in the attic about like seeing your future and all that's such a wasteful thing that was thrown in there. I do think that the thing about if the movie would have, conveying the end of the world, it built up the tension, right? It just doesn't stick the landing because then it's not the end of the world. It's just the end of this man. And I think that Flanagan does a good job of like, if it's not tied to Chuck, it's just tied to the world. I think it would have been like a really interesting thing. Again, it says nothing, it does nothing, but the elements, I guess, or the tonal things that he's doing in those scenes, Brendan, did give me a little bit of intenseness and anxiety through those moments. But then
there's some tension there.
But the minute I realized what it was, and I had to keep reminding myself, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm okay because this is stupid. So
we rarely use that word on this podcast. This might have the record. Stupid. It might have the record.
I'm not trying to make it that way, but I think that's that when you're watching something, it's not real or it's not it's non-consequential or anything. You're like, you just have to remind yourself, like, this is a really bad writing exercise. Like, you don't worry, it's not real. And once I got over that part, I'm like, then they start dancing and the tonal shifts. I gotta say, who is the actress that played the drummer here?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's look that up.
Because
she's really good.
I think she's really good, and I'd like to see more. Taylor Gordon, I believe is her name. She was great. Can we get her into more things and do more of that? And lastly, to Brendan's point at the beginning of all this, no, I am not looking forward to the Carrie adaptation. I don't think Carrie needs to be touched anymore. I think the original film was fine. I think a miniseries.
We've got Brian De Palma, and that's all we need.
We didn't all we need there. Like, Sissy Spacek knocked it out of the park back then. Flanagan should work on some. He honestly should just go back and write his own stuff. Like, he's really doesn't need to do adaptations of Stephen King the rest of his life. But he seems like he's got the vault. But yeah, Brendan, it's I still think this movie's. I think this movie's a mixed bag. Very disappointing. Still
it's
bad.
Certainly not one of the better Stephen King adaptations. Not even
no.
close.
It's on the low end. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For those of you listening, if you were one of those singing the film's praises back in the day when it first premiered, I'm sure you'll disagree with what Ryan and I just had to say. But if you'd like to let us know, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're active we're active in all those platforms. You can also email us directly your thoughts at insessionfilm@gmail.com. Before we get out of here, though, Ryan, thank you again for joining me for this conversation. Even when we have you on as a guest, feels like nothing's changed. You'll always be
No,
part of the In
man.
Session Film family.
I'm always going to have a part here. It's always great to be back. Next time we'll have to have JD and do something where I enjoyed. I feel like you were saying, like I'm not like coming on for only like negative things or
We'll get
in the
something
world.
positive here.
I gotta do
Yeah,
something positive.
we got to
Like I
do
gotta
something
be like,
good.
people are
Yeah,
gonna think I'm turning into Oscar the Grouch, like
we trust us, folks. We're not cynical people, even if we sometimes like cynical things.
no, but I do love a mean, cynical movie. Like
Yeah, I
there's
sometimes do too.
like I feel like we need some of those. But then again,
Yeah,
I go and see
yeah.
like a movie like F1 where it's like
We need
that's
those
like
too.
popcorn and soda
We just
fueled
need good
energy. And it's
movies. That's all we need.
yeah, I
Yeah, it
just need
doesn't matter what
something
they're
that's
going
gonna
for.
like stimulate this, this little pea brain that I got up here. You know what I mean? So
I don't know. I think it's a pretty intelligent pea brain. Probably the biggest pea brain out there if there is a size spectrum of pea
tell my
brains.
wife then. Tell
Okay,
my wife.
I will. But speaking of great work that pea brain is operating on, real quickly, Ryan, why don't you tell us about the great work you and your team are doing at AwardsWatch and where we can find you guys online?
Well, you can find all my work at awardswatch.com. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. If you like podcasts, outside of just the In Session Film Podcast, you can listen to the main show that's released on Mondays, and then you can listen to Old Voices. Myself and Jay Ledbetter do Director Watch. That's on Thursdays. We are wrapping up our Peter Jackson movie series, and we are doing an extensive episode on the Hobbit trilogy. We decided to not do one episode a piece on that. We just did 3 on one because that's fine enough. And 2 In Session Film, there is another familiar voice on that. In Session Film's own Dave Giannini is
Oh
on
yeah,
that show
that
with
guy.
us. And it's already been recorded, and I can tell you it is a wild episode. As Dave and Jay and I can attest. And then that will be releasing later this week. And next week we start our new film series over the films of one Mr. Paul Verhoeven.
Paul
So,
Verhoeven. Talk about a provocateur, if there ever was
yeah,
one.
talk about somebody that's made some cynical, nasty little films that the life of Chuck would be crying under its bed.
And great films, if I do say so myself. Man,
Yes,
Awards
sir.
Watch is killing it. I urge everyone listening to check out all of their great written and podcast work. But yes, if you love directors, Director Watch is an
We're gonna
absolute must
have you
listen.
guys back on the show sometime. in
I
the
can't
future.
wait. Yeah, last time I was on was during your Tony Scott series. We talked about Deja Vu.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't bring me on for any of the Hobbit movies when you guys were in the middle of your Peter Jackson series, because that would have just bored me.
I told Dave on the episode, and I'll tell you guys this, is that like I needed somebody that really loved that series and that would have put up watching those 3 movies again. And I knew you guys, I love you guys. I love Dave, but I know Dave would come and deliver and watch that, and then I get to make fun of him because of it. So
I like
a
the
good
first
time.
Hobbit. I actually don't hate that
I
one.
think that one's the best one.
I agree.
I think then after that it becomes a really bad exercise of nostalgia and the worst kind of blockbusters you can make nowadays.
I still remember seeing the Battle of the Five Armies in the theater, and when all of those armies come together and kind of all look at each other, I thought to myself, this is just like the sequence from Anchorman. And I don't think it's trying to be that goofy.
I also still attest to this day that there's not 5 armies in that movie.
That's a movie that does not know how to count.
The math is not mathing. Oh, and last thing. This movie is math propaganda. And to all my friends out there that do not like math, I love math.
I do too. Math is necessary. I'm a math defender.
I understand your complaints, and if that is another reason why you don't like this movie, go on ahead. Don't be math people. But I will say, just, math is an essential part of life. And,
It is.
But
Mark
is
Hamill's
it
not
essential
wrong.
enough to give up dance or give up film? Absolutely the hell not. So there you go. So.
Hey, just like music is math. That is the perfect medium that
There you go.
synergize.
I was going to say, that's
fuses it
big
all
for you.
together. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Math is all over my life, both in my full-time and part-time work. But yeah, I think that's a very fair point about this movie being pro-math propaganda. It absolutely is. But anyway, Ryan, really great having you back on, man. Got to do this again sometime soon. Just a few reminders before we adjourn for today. On episode 641, JD and I were joined by the great Adam Kempenaar from Film Spotting to discuss our best films of the 2020s so far. You don't want to miss that one. We also have reviews this week for Celine Song's Materialist, where we were joined by Brandon Lewis. Had a great conversation there. We also have a review of the new How to Train Your Dragon, which I believe JD's son Sam will be making an appearance on. Wouldn't be the first time. Probably has some very adorable thoughts with regard to his experience with the movie. That review either has already dropped or maybe is dropping after this one goes live, but it will be sometime this week as you are listening to this. But I think that should do it. Ryan, thanks again for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you all next time on the In Session Film Podcast.